Okay. Welcome everyone. I'm glad that everyone is here. I want to start off and just let Rock introduce himself.
Okay. I hope everyone remembers me because I used to be a prolific poster on Winston's forum. So I'm that same guy. And right now I'm in the US. I'm in Illinois. COVID kind of disrupted things for the last few months and already more than a year. And before that, I was in Asia, and I've been to quite a few countries I can talk about. And yeah, that's me.
Okay, do you want me to introduce myself again or?
Sure, Winston, that's fun.
Okay, my name is Winston Wu. I'm Asian American. I grew up in California and I run an expat website called happierabroad.com. And I met my friend Rock on the forum and we know each other in person too and have known each other for a lot of years. And he has a lot of knowledge and experience in Asia. So I thought he would be able to share a lot of information in a podcast. So yeah, you can let him do most of the talking. I'll just talk a little bit because he has a lot more knowledge than I do and experience. So just ask him whatever he wants, and if he wants to keep anything confidential, he'll just tell you that's confidential, and that's fine too. Yeah, just like a normal casual discussion.
Okay. Well, I can start off with a question here. Rock or Winston, whichever one wants to start. What are some of the biggest problems that you have with America today?
I don't have a problem with America per se. However, I think if one thing really shocks me, it's how things have changed regarding the wealth gap, the media, the censorship, political correctness. I never imagined that this would happen. The idea of freedom of speech is kind of a joke now. And it's easy to offend people by saying the wrong things. And that's what bothers me about America. It's not the stuff that Winston talks about. I don't really care about that very much because when I come to the US, I do my own thing. I don't rely on US for dating and I can kind of like glom on my parents' social networks. My dad's been in the same town, his family for about 200 years. So, they have connections, and we also are involved down in Florida, in Southwest Florida. But I just, the whole legacy of Donald Trump, and he basically called everyone out. He called it all out. So they basically had to show their cards, and they had to prove that, hey, yeah, we are censoring you. You do not have free speech. Before Donald Trump era, they could kind of pretend that didn't exist. It's very hard to deny it now. And what really makes me sad is a lot of people here don't seem to be aware of it, or they just think, they think that Donald Trump was such a horrible person or he was a joke. And that may be the case. However, what Donald Trump did do is he called out a lot of BS. And we saw that, but everyone forgets it. They focus on what a joke he was, which is really sad. I wish more people would open their eyes. That's what bothers me about America.
Yeah, and like I said yesterday, for me, it's just the dating culture, the social culture, and not being able to talk to strangers or make friends or fit into cliques. But Rock is more reserved than me, and he doesn't need as much social interaction as I do. So he doesn't have the exact same problems as I did. But yeah, when he was young, I mean, he didn't really date much in America either. So I guess we have that in common. And he didn't start dating seriously until he went to Asia. So
yeah, may I say may I say something? Winston has had more local girlfriends when he was young here than I have. I only really had one in just a few months, and it was a fluke. So yeah, I don't care about that. But one more thing I want to tell you, I looked at a map of Chicago, and it was a compare and contrast 1970 versus a year or two ago, and they had like 4 different zones. It was the the very poor areas, the maybe kind of poor areas, the middle class, and then the uber rich. And looking at that map in the 70s, probably 2/3 of it was middle class. And today it's, and the uber rich area back then was very small, a few little areas along the lake mostly. I'm not talking about the suburbs, just Chicago. Now today it's most of that middle class has been it's been replaced by the poorest class, and it's kind of like gangland territory. And then the rich areas have expanded. They're probably 5 times bigger. So it's gone from being a healthy middle class city to being haves and have-nots. And basically, to be a haves, you got to be a multimillionaire. And otherwise, if you're living in the city, you're living in a place where I think Chicago's known for shootings. They have shootings every day, and that's what's happened. And that's happened to a lot of cities in the non-coastal areas. The Bay Area is a special case. Los Angeles is a special case. So are Washington and New York City. But America's really gotten unhealthy. The wealth gap is huge now. And I think there must be a strategy for a few people to not allow others to be middle class anymore. That's what's going on here. But, before I go on, I hope you'll spend more time talking about the rest of the world, because talking about the US is a little bit depressing for me anyway.
Yeah, well, the US is not a great place to live long term, but it has a lot of beautiful nature and scenery and consumer choices, and the air is more fresh and clean than Asia is. So
that's
nice things,
Winston, that's the sad part, because it is beautiful here. There's so many beautiful things here. I love Florida, and I love some of those areas you showed me in around Vegas, those a couple hours out, and California is actually amazing in its way. And this is such a great country, or I want to say it was. And what's going on now with the people, well, all right, let me say one last thing about it. Winston mentioned that I didn't have much of a social dating life here, and that's true. So what I decided to do when I finished my education, well, even before, actually, I took a year off. I decided to check out other areas of the world. And the reason I did that was because when I was in university, I met foreign students. And those foreign students turned me on to the idea that, hey, in our countries, you might be having a good time. You might be popular over there. So I said, hey, that sounds good to me. And I did it. And boom. It's so much the case that I never had a real job in the US in my life. I made my whole career overseas by choice. And once I got out, I didn't want to come back. Not for the reasons I'm talking about now, but for social reasons that Winston talks about to this day.
You got any more questions, Andrew? Or
Sure. Let's see. Rock, Winston has told me that you're very knowledgeable of Asian culture.
Yeah.
Could you talk about your experience in Asia? What are some things that you love about Asia in contrast to America? And just could you also speak on kind of the value system in different parts of Asia and what people value the most?
Yeah, sure. Yes. First of all, I do want to highlight that things change over time. And, it's been a long time now. I've been involved in Asia for a long time. So some of the things that were there then are not there now, or to a lesser degree. And also things have changed for the better, the infrastructure, the wealth, all of that. So my main country when I started was Taiwan, which seems to be Winston's nemesis. But for me, it was the opposite. That was my first happier abroad country. And that's where I made my money. I mean, all the money I made it there mostly. And that's where I had my social life. And so Taiwan as a country, I know Winston's had a lot of complaints about it, but generally it has, for me, it's kind of economically, there's a big middle class there, which is really good. The crime is so low that it's insignificant. I mean, Taiwan a few decades ago was known for gangsters, but even then, those gangsters didn't really bother common people, although they did get involved in some government corruption scandals. But other than that, Taiwan is super safe. Taiwan has a healthy economy in that you really don't see poverty over there. You don't see much homelessness. I mean, I know if you go to the train station area one of the train station areas in Taipei, you can see some very old people that are living outside, but they're kind of they're from the long past, back when the KMT came over to Taiwan. It rains too much. I don't really like that part of Taipei. The people, they don't look degenerate like you see now in the States and some other parts of the West. They are, they're not gregarious. They're shyer, and I'd say they're very polite. There's some Japanese influence because Taiwan used to be a colony of Japan. So it's actually very different than China, even though ethnically the people are the same, but it's a different vibe. It's a developed world Asia. In the Northeast, what I considered the developed Northeast Asia would be Japan, Korea, South Korea, Taiwan, maybe the parts of the top cities in Shanghai. And then I'm going to put Singapore in that category because Singapore is 80% Chinese, even though geographically it's in Southeast Asia. I consider it part of developed Northeast Asia. And as for dating, unfortunately, when I first went, it was really cool to be a Westerner. And they even had clubs that would, like, if you're a Westerner, if you're a foreigner, they don't charge you an entrance, but if you're local, they do. That's not the case anymore. And I think Facebook made things a lot harder. You can go there, you can date, you can find a girlfriend and all that, but it would have been a lot easier 10 years, 15 years ago. And I've seen a lot of stories that corroborate, that back up what I'm saying, other foreigners who've had similar experiences. And the GDP per capita, if I want to compare it today versus 20 years ago, it's 4 or 5 times higher. So back in, say, the early 2000s, for example, or say the late 90s, even if you were just an English teacher, your income was relatively high. Now it's the opposite. You're kind of below the average. And so it used to be that a Western foreigner might have been considered by default economically advantaged if he was from a country like the UK or the US or Australia. That's no longer the case. Taiwan's been very influenced by, unfortunately, I think by California. The current president is somewhat, it's good and bad. She's, she's very open-minded in that she'll let foreigners get citizenship there pretty easily. She's made it easier. and foreigners are supposed to be treated exactly like locals, except for a few small things like voting and whatnot. So you have your human rights are intact there. And it's a small country. It's simple. It's got an amazing infrastructure, especially in Taipei. The MRT is spotless. You can use one card and get around and do everything with that card. You know, it's a card you put money on it and ride the taxis, buy things in 7-Eleven, ride all the different types of transportation. And believe it or not, it's arguably the cheapest first world country in the world because you can live there. You could probably live there for between 1,000 and 1,500 a month. And guess what? Your medical care is taken care of. Yeah, they have universal health care. And I've had so many medical things done there. And I always just wonder why the US, well, I know why the US doesn't follow there, but that's another conversation. So I have a lot of great things to say about Taiwan. And from Taiwan, especially after I stopped working, I branched out into other parts of Asia. So that would be the second part of my answer to your question. But before I say any more, I don't want to hog things. I want to let Winston speak. And I would even like you to speak a little bit because I know you too have experience in Asia and in countries different than me because you know a lot about Vietnam. I've only been to Vietnam a few times. So I'll talk about other parts of Asia in a minute.
Okay, Winston.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm here.
You want to say something, Winston?
Oh, well, no, I mean, I don't have anything to add to what you said. I mean, yeah. Yeah, I don't like Taiwan very much for the reasons I mentioned maybe yesterday or in the past, you know, but yeah, we're here to talk about your experiences, Rock, and what you suggest. And by the way, Andrew, if you have any questions about finance or economics or real estate, Rock knows a lot about that too. So
one more thing.
So he has a lot of practical knowledge.
One more thing I want to add. I'm a permanent resident of Taiwan, and if I wanted to, I could naturalize. But for the moment, they require you renounce your other citizenship, and I don't want to do that. I hope that law changes, and if it does, I'll be the first in line to naturalize there. So I'm permanent resident, which means I can live there. I have most of the rights. I think I think that people who come to Asia long term, they should look into things like permanent residency and citizenship and see what the opportunities are in the different countries. Unfortunately, a lot of countries, as Ladislav will say, are somewhat xenophobic about foreigners, and it's much harder to do that in say the Philippines. It's really impossible in Thailand. It's definitely impossible in China. You watch Serpent Zeta and some of the other expats who've been there long term, and it's so more difficult to be a foreigner in China versus Taiwan because you are not accepted in the same way. You're always going to be purely an outsider in countries like China and to a lesser extent Thailand. And the reason I say to a lesser extent is because Thailand has got these foreign ghettos, or they did, I don't know now with COVID, where you basically, if you want, you don't need to deal much with Thais. That's not the case so much in China. But both of these countries you got to know, they are not going to let you be the same. You're always going to be different. And some people like that and some don't. Good and bad, different in good and different in bad ways. Some people like that, some people don't. So if you really want to blend in and you want to be really part of the local scene, I'm going to say the best countries for that, believe it or not, you can do that to an extent in Taiwan. You can also do that in the Philippines. And to some extent in the Philippines, it depends on what you look like, because some Westerners could even almost could pass for Filipino, and some stand out like a sore thumb. But appearance matters in Asia. I think appearance matters a lot. So, Andrew, would you like me to talk about the Philippines?
Yes, please.
Okay. I mentioned that after Facebook, Taiwan got more challenging in a lot of ways. And let's just say I got bored. I'd been there too long. And not that I don't travel, because I do, but I decided, and especially after reading the forum so much, Philippines seemed to be the darling of Happier Abroad. And before Happier Abroad, I used to think of Philippines as just this ghetto dump of a country that, I never considered it. I thought it was just because I had gone to the Philippines before. I'd been there on business, and I'd gone there a long time ago just to see it. And I just thought it was such a ghetto of a country. I didn't want to go back. And okay, but after reading all these posts about how great it had become, and I ended up moving over there. I mean, as a tourist, I never got even that visa they have for, I never got the resident visa. I ended up staying in Makati most of the time. And I really had a ball because I was there around, I started staying there more from 2012, 2013. And it jump started my social and dating life. And it was really what I needed. It was really, in spite of such a bad infrastructure, it was really refreshing and like a second spring. And also about the infrastructure, it's true that the public infrastructure there, it's abysmal. I mean, I've been to Africa a lot, and I've been a lot of places in the world, and most of the cities in Africa that I've been to have better infrastructure than the public infrastructure in Metro Manila. However, the private stuff, the condos and the malls, those have improved a lot. And nowadays, and before COVID, Ayala was basically building little oasis areas all around Metro Manila, even on the outskirts. You had that. And then you've got this area called the Fort, BGC, which I'm going to estimate is like a good square mile, maybe even bigger, with a walking street in the middle. And that's totally organized, planned, modern, first world. You can always go there, you can stay there. And so I'm saying now you can actually escape the bad infrastructure if you really want to in Metro Manila. And I think they're doing a lot of things up in Pampanga, which is where Angeles City is. That's getting developed a lot. And that's the second richest area after Metro Manila. And so if you don't like the bad infrastructure, there's hope. And as for the people, yeah, they're lovely people. I haven't really worked there, except I joined the board of directors in my condo, and I got very involved in that. Had a couple legal cases there, and I invested in condos to rent out. So I bought some condos and I rent those out for extra income. And as for the cost of living, believe it or not, it's probably more expensive than Taiwan for me. I mean, if you want to buy property, of course, Taiwan, that's the one thing in Taiwan that's very expensive is property to buy it. But renting is not a big deal. It's fairly inexpensive. And rents in Metro Manila are probably similar, but buying in Metro Manila is still a lot cheaper. But if you want to have, if you want to be treated well, and if you're older, okay, especially if you're older. And I think we should talk about this too at some point. different ages of expats probably have different areas that are going to fit them more. I think you are probably a younger guy, and for you, maybe Vietnam's cool. But I think that maybe Vietnam girls are probably going to be pickier about age than Filipinas, or maybe even Thais. So that's a very important consideration. And I did notice that the Philippines attracts a lot of older guys. And most of them don't stay in Metro Manila, though. Most of them, they cannot stand the awful air and the traffic, really horrible traffic. And so they go to other parts of the island. For me, Metro Manila's got the best of the Philippines in terms of people, in terms of shopping. Oh, and medical care. I get medical care there. It's not like Taiwan where it's mostly paid for, but it's certainly just a fraction of what it costs in the US. And there are some insurance programs you can get into. Of course, you pay for that. But I haven't really tried that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm saying so much and I'm kind of just speaking off the cuff. So I probably need you or Winston, and maybe you guys can direct things with your questions.
I wanted to go back to what you were saying about when you went there, you felt it was refreshing to be there socially and for your dating life. Could you kind of talk more about why that was?
Well, okay. When I was in the US way back in high school, college, I was a nobody. I couldn't get any attention, maybe because I was so shy and I just didn't know how to relate. I'm going to say my social IQ was maybe 2 or 3 years lower than my age. So I didn't know what was going on and I lost out because of that, because there's really nothing wrong with me. I was normal. I wasn't retarded. I didn't look bad or anything like that. I just couldn't relate to the scene. So I didn't get any dates. And then when I went to Taiwan back then, it was like, everybody's looking at me. Everybody's like, people are telling their friends, hey, I felt so popular. And then, so I became like a serial dater there. And then later I got a high paying job, and that helped. Believe me, it helps. You got a name card with from a big company, and you've got a good title, and they look at that. Of course, in Asia, that matters. They think about that. That doesn't mean they're gold diggers, but it helps your status to have a good job. And so I had that experience, but the time passed, and as I said, Taiwan changed, especially after Facebook, and I got older. And then so things were winding down for me. But then I went to the Philippines. I kind of felt it was kind of like when I went to Taiwan in the beginning, maybe not quite as good in that, the quality of the women in Taiwan is so high. And it's not as high in the Philippines, but you can cherry pick in the Philippines. I like taller women. I like women with a shape, and most Filipinas are shorter, but not all. And I've been with several that are between 5'6" and 5'8", even one that was 5'9". So when I went there, I found that I could. Now, here's another difference. I was meeting them a lot more online. Like, what was the website? Filipino Cupid, and maybe there was another one. I did a little bit of cold approach, but not much. Whereas in Taiwan, it was cold approach. I was meeting people by cold approach. So that's one difference. But I was getting a very good response online, and I was very picky. I was filtering. For no children, and I was filtering for people who actually wrote a real profile, didn't just say 2 words, who looked educated. And I was filtering for height. I was going for those who had their height above 5'5". And then once I got a conversation going with them, I would bounce it over to WhatsApp or Viber and then get to know them. And if they seemed look at more pictures, get their Facebook account if they had one. And then if I was interested, I would try to meet up with them. And I had a lot of luck with that. And so I was like, wow, this is so awesome. And I think back then I learned from posters like Mr. S, who kind of suggested, hey, go to Makati, get a condo, you'll have a good time. Things will be pretty easy. And they were. And Filipinos are generally easygoing. They laugh a lot. I'm talking about their good sides now. That's another thing. I was expecting the country to be dangerous, but they're very passive. So the crime is not as bad as I thought it would be. Nobody ever, and I've been to a lot all over Metro Manila, not just Makati, and nobody ever confronted me violently, like the kind of things that happen in South America or parts of Africa never happened to me there. And I think Mr. S is in the same boat, and he's been there a lot longer. So surprisingly, given its position economically, it's pretty safe. The Filipinos are not aggressive. And they also, I think over time, they can forgive. If they're angry about something, they can let it go over time. Their attitude is very aligned with, what you learn in church about forgiving and not being too much into materialism, and not, a lot of these people quote things on their Facebook a lot that are from the Bible or from, I think they've got a very positive attitude about things. And I'm going to say some bad things now. And the bad things are people there don't have a will to get things done. So when you say, if you want to do any sort of a task, a business task, maybe a bureaucratic task, you're going to get so angry. Like I said, I bought condos, and sometimes that would take months and months just to do all the paperwork. Whereas in Thailand, you can do it, you can snap your fingers and do it in a day. You can buy or sell a condo that fast. In the Philippines, whether you buy, whether you sell, it's so frustrating. You have to go to so many different agencies, and there's a wait time, and the government offices are pigsties, especially like Makati City Hall. I just could not believe how filthy and dirty. They were using typewriters from the 40s in some cases, and they would bring their kids there. They would eat, they would take naps, and they would, when you wanted them to serve you, sometimes their attitude was like, come back tomorrow. I'm not in the mood today. So they're very disorganized. And like I said, the public infrastructure there's dirty. The roads are awful. And the public transportation, awful. The jeepneys and the MRT, and getting around in Uber means, you're sitting still for a lot of time. It's just so frustrating. And they have flooding problems when it rains in a lot of areas. So that's kind of like off the cuff, the good and the bad about the Philippines. And from what I've read and what I understand, dating wise, it's going to be maybe the easiest in Asia. Indonesia's good, Jakarta, but not quite as good as the Philippines. It's going to be more challenging, especially for an older guy. Thailand, it's more about pure materialism. A lot of people say Philippines is all about money, but it's different because they're not as calculating about it. They're not as clever about it. So you go to Thailand, and I think foreigners in Thailand who get involved in serious relationships find themselves under pressure to buy houses, to pay dowries, all this crazy stuff. Not so much the case in the Philippines. In fact, a lot of them are, even genuine. They don't even do that. So I think you haven't been to the Philippines, if I remember right, but I'm curious, could you go on from what I've been saying about, could you extend what I've been saying about Vietnam, like talk along the same topics? I've been to Ho Chi Minh a few times, and it's some of the architecture there is so amazing. I love that French architecture. But on the other topics I talked about, would you mind elaborating?
You were talking about a few different things. I'll just go briefly. As far as the women, I think they're pretty socially conservative. They're nothing like Thailand. They're not as Thai girls are much more outgoing, and I think they're a little bit wilder. Vietnamese women are not as outgoing, and like you kind of have to approach them first. They're not going to approach you first. They may, but usually it's the man that's going to approach first. And it, I mean, I've had some success, but I think they're very good looking here. And I think that they're loyal. I think they're fairly loyal in terms of relationships. But you were talking about business and things like that. I can't say anything about that. I do know a guy from California who opened a successful Mexican food restaurant in Saigon. So you definitely can come to Vietnam as an American and start a business if that's your dream. Saigon and Hanoi are definitely not my favorite cities. They're very packed. They're very busy. A lot of hectic, chaotic transportation roads. A lot of many people drive the motorbikes. But my favorite places in Vietnam are along the coastline where it's very peaceful and there's a lot of beaches and just very nice weather. Air quality is great. And, obviously it's a very low cost of living here. Let's see. As far as healthcare, I don't think the healthcare it's nothing close to American quality, the professional quality in America. In the major cities, Hanoi and Saigon, it's much higher quality. But outside of those cities, I don't think the quality is as good. To get an ambulance if something would happen to you, it would. I've never had to have it, but it would come. It's not going to be as quick as America. Okay, I think that's. But overall, a lot of Americans retire in Vietnam. I've met a couple, and they seem to be pretty happy. And Winston introduced me to a guy from California, and I met him in person, and I think he's fairly happy here. So that's what I have to say about Vietnam.
I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I think that I'm more of an urban person, and I was impressed about how cheap Ho Chi Minh was. I went there the last time I took somebody with me. I think that was 3-4 years ago. But yeah, the motor scooters are like locusts. They're awful. I mean, but besides that, the architecture that's something that you don't see in most of Asia. And it's really something. And by the way, I started to look a lot at your neighbor, Cambodia. And I even, I got a condo there, and I spent a little time there with Winston, and I think his name is World Traveler on the forum. And I liked it because it was kind of like Thailand without all of the influence from, I mean, Thailand's, believe it or not, Bangkok got more tourist arrivals than any other city in the world. I think back in 19. I mean, Thailand was being flooded by tourists for so many years and decades. Cambodia, not so, but Cambodia is really coming up. And I found that even though Cambodia is actually lower than the Philippines on GDP per capita, it's more organized. The infrastructure is more convenient. It makes more sense. And people there do things in a more common sense way. Like I was able to get a 1-year visa in a day. Just, pay a little extra. That's the kind of corruption I like. In the Philippines, you can't even do that. No matter how much money you have, you can't get around the bureaucracy really. And in Cambodia, you can carve out a nice little life there. It doesn't have nearly as much as Ho Chi Minh. In fact, I know someone who was in an accident there and they got sent right to Saigon. They got for medical treatment. They were in a serious motorcycle accident. But it's a country I think some should look at. And Ladislav spent several months there teaching English. And that's one of those countries where if you want to really date instead of just pay for play, but pay for play is pretty nice there. But if you want to do that, you have to really localize. And that's a big project because to learn that language, it's not tonal, by the way, like Thai, but it's still related to Thai. You want to localize there, you're going to have to immerse yourself, I'm going to say, for at least a good 2 to 3 years. And not everyone's prepared to do that. That's something you don't have to do in the Philippines. But the people are they seem really straightforward and nice. I'm still dealing with them because of my condo. And in spite of COVID, they're still helping me find renters. And I think they may be even more conservative than Vietnamese. They're very elegant people. They kind of seem to me like Thais without all the corruption, without all the materialism, without all the foreign influence. That's what my impression. And of course, you also have that French colonial element, which means there are some nice buildings. They're not as nice as Vietnam, but yeah, it's a nice little country to consider. It's easy, it's simple. The bus system, like if I take a bus from, say, Siem Reap to Phnom Penh, it's a nice bus and it's a fast ride. And maybe the food isn't as good as in Thailand, but they still have plenty of good food there. Probably not as good as in Vietnam either. So that's what I can say about Cambodia. We've talked about, let's see, what's another country we can talk about now? Well, China. I'm going to bring China up now. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. What I want to say about China is China was a blast before the Olympics. Like, I've been going there on and off over the years and decades. And the best time in China, I think, was, for a foreigner anyway, was, the first decade of the 2000s, especially the 2005, around that time. It was really, it was easy to date. Not as easy as the Philippines, but it was pretty easy. I speak Chinese, so that helps. But even guys who didn't were okay in the cities like Shanghai and Beijing. And people were curious. China was embracing the West at that point. They were at that stage in their development where they were trying to learn what they could from us. But now, and the last time I went to China was 2 years ago. I was dating someone there. I went to Fuzhou and I went to Xiamen and spent some weeks in those places. And it was okay. But the thing is, a book I have to recommend is An American Bum in China. It's both hilarious and very enlightening about how China's been changing. And the thing is, today it's become, I'm going to say it's very anti-foreigner, because their economy has gotten to the stage where they don't need us anymore. The current leader there is extremely, he kind of reminds me in some ways of Mao Zedong. He's very about making China take the world over. And, they can kind of control the attitudes of the people there through the media. I mean, even to this day, using a VPN is very hard there for me anyway. And therefore, when you're there, you can't use WhatsApp, you can't use Skype, you can't see Google, you can't get Facebook. They have their own information there. And a lot of people look at Westerners, the way they've been talking about America is that it's declining. There's a lot of crime. There's a lot of unemployed people who are kind of worthless. And therefore, the attitudes you're going to feel in China are not going to be the way they were 10, 15 years ago, where people were a lot more curious and they looked up to you more. And there's so many things you cannot do there. I mean, even this, when you buy tickets or whatever, you have to go through a different process than the locals. I mean, the good thing about China now is it's cashless. You get your WeChat Pay going, and even in the night market, you pay for things with your phone, and it takes a second, literally. But with foreigners, it's more complicated. And guess what? A lot of hotels won't even take foreigners. Yeah, you've got to go to hotels that accept foreigners. And so, especially if you're in second or third tier China, you need a place to stay, and you walk in and they say they don't allow foreigners. What are you going to do? I mean, it's really a hassle, and you really feel it every day that you're not the same, and in a bad way mostly. So I know that Winston was really enamored with China a few years ago and before he went, but again, time means everything. China or any country can be great for a while, and then it can turn into a nightmare. And I think that China, even for business, it's not the same. There are ways you could go there and make some real money 10, 15 years ago. Well, imagine if you get into a court case there, you're usually always going to lose. They're very xenophobic in that way. Unlike if you go to China, people are not going to be rude and nasty to you. They're going to be fine. But when you get in any conflicts, the system there it's all against you. That's my impression about China as a Westerner. Now, remember, Winston is different because he even has a different visa status there since he's from Taiwan. He's got a special Taiwan compatriot visa, and people think he's Chinese. So he may get treated in some ways different or better than a Westerner or a Black person. And by the way, I mean, about Blacks, they're very open with their racism. Some of the words they say. And I think recently there was a murder case there. An American Black guy murdered one of his students, and social media was going crazy about that, and they were saying all these racist things. It is what it is. And understand, I know we have a guy on the forum, I think, what's his name, Jamaica in China or something, and he had a lot of good experiences there way back, but they're open about their bias and their racism. They don't like Japanese, they'll say it. They don't like foreigners, they'll say it. They have some names they can use, or Blacks. I mean, they're not going to beat you up or even hurl slurs at you for nothing. But if you get involved in some way and you have a conflict, all that stuff will come out. If something bad happens, all that stuff will come out. That's my opinion.
Wow. So, Rock, I mean, which country do you recommend the most? I mean, for expats, I mean, and why?
Okay.
What are your
Okay.
favorites?
Okay,
Where,
Winston,
where's,
what?
no, I mean, what are your favorites? What do you recommend for people?
Well, the most important thing you have to do is evaluate yourself because everyone's different. Like China may be better for you than it is for me. And if infrastructure matters a lot, maybe Thailand's better than the Philippines. Um, if you like, if beauty is important to you and you like a certain type, maybe you need to go to Japan. Japan has got, I think you've been to Japan before, right? Um, did you live in Japan?
I've been
Uh,
to
Who, me or
Japan.
Andrew?
Andrew, you lived in Japan, right?
I didn't live there, but I was a tourist there for about 6 months.
Yeah, Japan has got a lot to fall in love with. For some people, I mean, like Moncro, I think that's one of his ideal countries. But for a lot of people, they're only going to see the bad. So Winston's question, it's a Taylor question. You cannot say one country is the best. You cannot say that accurately because it's not going to work. Like the Philippines is going to save some people, but it's going to be hell on earth for others. One of our posters, Mr. S, is absolutely miserable there. Miserable there. He's been there for 15 years now and he's trying to get out, but because he's got a daughter, he's got to get a passport and it's COVID. So I think we have to speak about the qualities of each country and leave it at that without saying this is the best. Because if I say that, it's according to my own bias.
Right.
Or
But,
what
but,
cost of living, or all those things come into play. It's a matrix. In matrix, you have to look at all these different qualities and rate each country, and then decide which one matches you based on what qualities matter the most to you.
but what country would you say has the most maximum number of pros with the minimal number of cons?
Well,
Like,
like I said, it depends on what a pro is for you. For me,
It's relative.
yeah, it's relative. Infrastructure is important for me. So for me, that's a big minus on the Philippines. But for some people like Ladislav, they don't care. And so he doesn't even see that. And for you, it's all about approachability. So you hate Taiwan because people in Taiwan tend to be reserved. But for me, I don't care. It doesn't bother me. So I I can't really answer that, but maybe you guys can ask more specific questions.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of intangibles involved too, like when
That
I
too.
talk about vibe or energy or positive, negative energy or something, or soul draining or toxic vibe, or that's very subjective and intangible. So it's not like every white guy has the same experience in Asia or every Asian guy has the same experience in this country or that, right? It's not always about
Absolutely.
your race or looks.
Absolutely. And I remember Mr. S when he went to visit Taiwan. You know what he said? He said, he has this long beard, I guess because he was getting hit on by gays in the Philippines too much. So he tried to do this to scare people off, and people stare at him a lot in the Philippines. He said when he went to Taiwan, it was so refreshing because nobody looked at him twice. They treat him like a normal person. So there's that. That's just one example of what matters for one person. But Winston, do you want to refute anything I said about China?
Well, I mean, I don't know it that well. I mean, I was just there as a traveler and a tourist. I mean, I don't know stuff about the practical stuff, but I mean, I never said China was great or bad. It's just very interesting, but it's not as bad as the media makes it out to be. That's what I told Andrew yesterday, that there's a lot of good things about it, but the media never talks about it. And I don't see it as a totally a totalitarian place where there's no freedom at all. I mean, because
Yeah,
there's two different types of freedom. There's political
you
freedom and there's social freedom, but the media only talks about political freedom.
yeah,
But that's me as a tourist. If I live there long term, I mean, I might see a dark side that I don't normally see. I mean, who knows?
Okay, let me give you an example of that. When I go to China, people leave me alone. Like I said, of course, some hotels won't take me, but people are generally cool with me. They don't bother me, which is cool. So you're right. It's not that in your face totalitarian if you just go to visit there. I went to Egypt last year, and in Egypt, I was shocked because I was getting stopped on the street by plainclothes police and by military, wanted to check my phone, this, that, and the other thing, because it was on like one of the anniversaries of the Arab Spring, and I was near Tahrir Square, but I felt every moment, every second that I was in a totalitarian state where I had absolutely no freedom. People could stop me, people could question me, and I couldn't talk about things. I was talking to a guide there, and I started talking about certain topics. I think just sports, and he said, "Well, you can't really talk about that here." He told me not to talk about so many different things, and I was like, "Wow, this is what they mean when they talk about totalitarianism," because some of those Middle Eastern and Northern African countries are hyper strict about so many things. Oh, another thing, taking pictures. You take a picture and say, if a girl happens to be in that picture, you might get harassed and even beaten up. In China, everybody lets you, nobody in China, if you don't get involved in certain things, people in China are cool. They're pretty easygoing. So yeah, you're right, Winston. There are different levels of that. And in China, they're smart. They don't act like assholes when they don't have to. And in spite of all the things that Xi Jinping is doing, which are bad for foreigners, and all the rights that you don't have there, you don't get harassed the way you do in some parts of the world. And that's a good thing about Asia in general. Asia is a very live and let live vibe. Asians, they don't like confrontation in general. I mean, yeah, you meet some crazy people in China who want to like have a go at you because you're a foreigner, but in general, people leave you alone. Guards in the Philippines smile at you. Even in China, like the passport control people will joke around with you sometimes, even though they're so serious. So I think that goes across the board with East and Southeast Asia. The people are very easy to be around, and they don't like if you stand somewhere, you go somewhere, people leave you alone. They don't tell you, "Hey, get lost. You can't do this. You can't do that." You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's very non-confrontational.
Uh, well, I've had a few confrontations.
Well, tell us about them.
Well, I'm not an experienced traveler. I've been living abroad for 5.5 years, but I went to a mall in Bangkok. This was a shopping mall, and I went to the top floor to look at boxing gloves, some Muay Thai gloves. And I was looking at the gloves, and, I decided I wasn't going to buy the gloves. And the guy that worked there, he was a Thai guy. I started to leave his booth area, and he grabbed my arm, and he held onto my arm. He wouldn't let me go. And he started he started going a little bit crazy on me, like, because you're looking at my product, you're looking at my gloves, you have to buy something here. Like, he was saying, you have to buy something here. I was like, no, I don't want to buy anything. And he started going nuts, and he said he's going to call the security guard. And then he told me later that he went to prison in Thailand. And I was like, okay, that's why you're going nuts on me. But I was looking at the gloves like 5 minutes, and I guess he got mad that I had been looking at the gloves for that long and I didn't buy anything. I guess I was just being I don't think I did anything wrong, but I discussed this with my friend, and he was, you know, so. But that's one time.
Oh, I've experienced that in Hong Kong too. Yeah. I
No,
mean,
but
some
you
of the
guys have to
sellers are that
understand.
aggressive. Yeah.
You guys have to understand that these are what I call isolated anecdotes, and anything can happen anywhere like that. Now, it is true though that Thais, some of them have short fuses, and if you don't behave in a certain way in Thailand, you can get into confrontations or worse. It's true that they have short fuses there. If you behave in the wrong way, not to say that you did that, you didn't. I think this guy was just crazy. He was an ex-con. You can meet someone like that anywhere. It can just happen by bad luck. But I'm talking about general tendencies and patterns. And in Thailand, if meek and mild, I'm going to say someone like Shong Mao, Brett, somebody like that is never going to have a problem in Thailand because of the way he behaves. And, he's respectful, he's soft, and you could live there a million years and you could walk around at night, middle of the night in Bangkok. You won't get mugged. Nobody's going to bother you. But if you go around with a chip on your shoulder, like say an American in Bangkok, he's been in fights, but he's a fighter. I mean, that's his thing. A lot of Westerners there do get in confrontations with the local people, and the local people there won't take crap. They've got much less tolerance than, say, people in the Philippines. So anywhere in Asia, if you act in the wrong way, things can go south very quickly. You've got to behave according to the social norms. But what I'm saying is that, like, say, when I go to the Middle East or if I go to North Africa, no matter what I do, I'm going to get harassed. And when I go to South America, I'm going to always have to worry about being mugged or robbed, no matter how careful I am or what precautions I take. That's just not the case in Asia. In Asia, it's easy to be safe. All you have to do is behave in the right way. That's my impression about Asia. And some countries are better than others. Taiwan is super safe. Southeast Asia is not as safe as Taiwan, but it's still relatively safe, especially when you look at criminality versus GDP per capita. Asia is going to rank low in most of those countries, including the Philippines. And I'm sorry that happened to you. By the way, I myself have known 3 different people who did prison time in Thailand. I went to visit a couple of them. And I've read a lot of books written by former prisoners there, mostly Westerners. So I found that kind of like sub-environment interesting. And, oh yeah, that's one more thing you got to know. It's very easy to get into trouble in Thailand legally because Thailand has the highest incarceration rate in all of Asia. And in the world, it's up there. I mean, the US is the highest, but I think Thailand is in the top 3 or top 5 because they're so strict on so many different things, including, of course, drugs. And I mean, even, little marijuana can get you in prison there. So you have to keep those things in mind. Asia is very strict about substance in general, but Thailand is off the charts. You get into a fight or a conflict there, you can end up going to prison. If you accidentally take something you didn't mean to, I mean, people have done that before, you can go to prison. Like China, the system's kind of rigged against you. Not as much as in China, but it is. So those are important considerations when you think about your own personality and whether or not you can control your temper and whether or not you can behave in the way that Asians behave. Because if you can't, there are better parts of the world for you, I think.
Wow, that's a wealth of information. What do you think, Andrew? I mean, Where do you want to go next, Andrew? I mean, do you want to stay in Vietnam or go somewhere else?
I was planning on going back to Thailand, just because I love Thailand and I've made some friends there, and it's probably probably my favorite country in Asia.
Well, yeah, you could just go over ground, like take the train or the bus back there through Cambodia. That'd be a really good tour through Cambodia and then Thailand.
Right, I could do that, but it's not open right now, I don't think.
Oh,
you know
yeah.
what? No. Actually, I was just told by Alara yesterday that Phuket is open. You can go to Phuket, stay 14 days, then go to other parts of Thailand.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that. Why is Phuket open, but you can't go to Bangkok or Pattaya?
I think that's their strategy. They're going to have a small area you can go, and you can do your quarantine there, except it's not really quarantine because you can go out and about. And then boom, you can go, because come on, tourism is so important to their economy. It's like 15% of their GDP.
Oh, okay. But you'd have to fly there. You can't just
take
a bus.
You can't take a bus from where you are.
Yeah, I heard about that. That's a good idea, to go to Phuket and then from there you could fly or take a bus somewhere else. But yeah, Thailand is suffering now. It's on lockdown, I heard. It seems like all of Asia is locked down at the same time, except maybe for China or something. It's kind of ominous. But yeah, I was talking to a Thai girl on webcam, and she showed me the beach on Pattaya, and it was really empty. Even tonight it was.
I agree. Somebody's voice. We can't hear you. Hello?
Oh, no, I didn't say anything.
No, Andrew,
I
heard some echoing from Andrew's side.
Were you going to say something, Andrew?
No, I was going to listen to you guys. I was going to ask Winston, which country, Winston, you told me that you wanted to leave Taiwan. Where did you want to go next?
Well, I don't know. I was going to go to Cambodia and continue my tour and then see you in Vietnam, but it's kind of difficult, and I'm kind of undecided. And since the U.S. has opened up again and not wearing masks anymore, I was thinking of going there and showing my parents around the Southwest maybe first. So I'm not sure what to do first. It's kind of like, I'm kind of indecisive a lot. It's one of my downsides. But yeah, I just want to go somewhere. I like Thailand just like you. I mean, it's very stimulating and it has a lot of dynamic energy. So it feels like you're excited all the time. It's almost like, in a way, like Las Vegas, but a lot cheaper, of course. It's like you're all overstimulated by all kinds of things and stuff that's really interesting. And so it's like a place where you never feel bored or in a lull or anything. Is that why you like Thailand too? It has that really dynamic energy and there's so much to see and do. And I mean, Andrew, is that why you like it too, or?
I love it.
And the women are really attractive too, of course. Yeah. And they seem very classy.
I think there's a problem with my microphone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you were echoing a minute ago.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Well, I love Thailand. I first went there with my friend from high school, and we had a blast. Just like I think everyone has a blast when they first go to Thailand. Okay, but I like the way of life there. I just like how Thais kind of view life, and the Thai people are very happy, and they're very they kind of have the view that you should enjoy life, enjoy today, and not stress too much about tomorrow. And that kind of fits in with my view. And of course, I get along with the women there too. I've had a girlfriend in Thailand, so I kind of just fit in naturally to Thailand.
Yeah, you'd probably like it in the Philippines too if you like that kind of stuff. I mean, that really relaxing, soothing vibe where nothing is serious and it's very carefree. The Philippines has that vibe too, so you would definitely like it there. But Rock says Thailand is not as good as it used to be. I mean, but it's still fairly cheap and inexpensive, right, Rock? I mean,
Well, first of all, we still don't know what it's going to be like post-COVID. You know, COVID's a big wild card. We don't know how, because it seems like more than anywhere in the world, Asia went paranoid about COVID. And that's why I'm not there now. And I'm thinking of spending some time in Africa or South America, because I too don't want to wear masks. I don't want to be locked down. I don't want curfews. I think everyone's so freaking paranoid about it, especially like in the Philippines. They're losing their life over this thing. So as long as Asia's like that, I don't know about going back, but I do. I think Thailand's got so much going for it. It's very easy. It's efficient. You've got choices between very urban like Bangkok, like seaside urban like Pattaya, or what's that other city on the other side of? You can take a boat, the King City. I can't remember the name at the moment. It's more tranquil. You can go to Chiang Mai. I haven't been to Phuket in a long time, but yeah, Thailand really has anything and everything. And it's got the most fun, the best food.
and it's still low cost living, right?
Well, not like it used to be, but yes, you can live pretty cheaply in like Chiang Mai or even Pattaya. Bangkok, you're going to be paying a substantial amount on rent. If I want to compare Bangkok today to what it was, a few years after the Asian economic crisis, the cost there in US dollar terms is probably 2 to 3 times what it was then, maybe 3 times. So just put, that's some perspective. It used to be dirt cheap. And these days I'm thinking that Vietnam is probably cheaper. I may be wrong. I'm going to say to have decent life there, if you're going to be in Bangkok, maybe $2,000 a month at least. If it's the cheaper parts, maybe 1,500 US will do you. But if you want to live, I know foreigners there who live a really frugal lifestyle and who can do it for 1,000 a month or less. It's possible, but it doesn't sound like fun to me.
But what if you live on the outskirts, like that guy we met, who
Scott
calls
Malone?
himself, an American in Bangkok? He lives on the outskirts of Bangkok.
He lives in Bangkok, and that's a suburb. And the suburbs in Bangkok are developing because the public infrastructure it's so good. It's not as good as Taipei's, but it's still really good. And because of that, a lot of people they understand that it's too expensive to buy in the city. They're developing condos and shopping malls on the outskirts. So that part is probably going to be getting more expensive too. Maybe we can ask him sometime. We can ask.
But you could be like Ladislav and just live in a hotel every month, right? And I mean, there's cheap hotels if you don't mind low quality Spartan conditions.
In Bangkok, the cheapest areas, maybe like Bang Lampu, Khao San Road, that's gone up a lot because it's been gentrified. A lot of it's kind of gone upscale. So it's harder and harder to slum it in Bangkok compared to even 10 years ago. I think if you're going to do a hotel, it's going to be hard, and you have your own room and you're going to want an air conditioner. It's going to be very hard to go under 1,000 baht a day for a hotel. But if you rent a place, maybe you can find something for maybe 12,000 baht a month in Greater Bangkok, and in Pattaya, maybe. Oh, you know what? Because of COVID, Pattaya is really a buyer's market now. You could probably find something there for 5 or 6, maybe 5,000 baht, maybe 6,000 baht a month. There's so many empty units, and there's good quality. You can have a swimming pool, a gym, all that stuff. And so, yeah, if you want to go to Thailand now, maybe you're going at the right time as far as costs are concerned, because all the tourists are gone and everyone's going to be desperate for your money. So, and by the way, just as a plug, and I have nothing to do with this, but a great source of Thai information is Stickman, the Stickman Guide. And I think he left for a while, then he came back and he stopped writing again, I think about 3 or 4 months ago. But there's reader submissions. There's a wealth of information about Thailand on Stickman Bangkok. So that's one.
Is he still active or?
No, he's taking a break now because of COVID.
Oh, okay. But how can Andrew stay there long term? I mean, you can only have a 1-month visa, right? I mean, it's hard to get more.
Yeah, Andrew, do you want to stay long term there?
Yes, I do.
Well, maybe you can study Thai or something like that, and get a student visa.
The education.
But how does he get a longer visa than 1 month?
That's what I'm saying. If you study Thai, you get an education visa.
Oh, so you could just go to like a once-a-week class or something, and then
no. You can't bullshit. If you're going to do that, you really have to go to class. But I think they have those types of opportunities. And now with COVID, maybe they're going to have other schemes to get you to go. And once you're over 50, you can get the retirement visa, which Johan has, if you know Johan from the forum. But since you're under 50, you can try to maybe do a student visa. I can try and learn more about it if you're interested. I'll try to find out what options are available. But as I say, where there's a will, there's a way. If you really want to stay there, you can probably figure out a way to do it, especially once they stop these dumb lockdowns, if that ever happens.
Yeah, Andrew, were you there before on a tourist visa, or how long did you stay? I mean, how did you stay longer than a month?
What I did was I would either go outside of Thailand and apply for an actual visa that would give me 3 months in the country, and then I'd leave the country again and then come back in on the airport visa that would give me 30 days. And then I'd extend it for another 30 days at immigration. So I'd be able to stay in the country for 5 months out of the year.
Oh, yeah. You used to be able to do that. You could go to the border, like in Cambodia or something, and then do a visa run and then come back and get another 1 month, right? I don't know if you can do that now.
You cannot do that now. It's not possible now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because they cracked down on that, but that's too bad.
I have a feeling that once they start to open up, they may offer some special options to attract people, because I'm sure that they've lost a lot of their economy from the sudden disappearance of tourists and visitors and expats even. So, there must be some way for you. I mean, you want to stay there without leaving for a year? How long do you want to stay there?
Well, I was already looking into the education visa. Someone told me about a Muay Thai education visa where you can go to Muay Thai classes. And that's for 1 year.
That would be great.
I was going to do that.
That would be great. And you'd get in shape, and that sport will get you into such great shape, and it'll help you mentally too.
And you mean Muay Thai boxing, you mean?
Right. It's some kind of new program. It used to be in Chiang Mai only, but now you can do it in Bangkok.
That sounds
you mean great. like boxing? Oh, I didn't know you could get an education visa from taking boxing classes.
You can.
Okay.
Wow.
I have another question, you guys. We've talked about a few countries. Does anyone know anything about Indonesia?
No, I don't know anything about it, except that it's Muslim or something. But
okay, Winston, I have an idea for a future podcast. Maybe we could talk to Frank El Claudio, because he knows a lot about Indonesia, Jakarta, and that would be an interesting country to add to this. And also, based on whatever comments you get on your YouTube channel, we can always do follow-ups and answer questions that come up a lot that we missed. If you think that's a good idea, I'm just suggesting things for your channel here.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about anything,
and also, you guys, another thing that I can talk about on another podcast is Africa and even Latin America, because I've spent time in both of those regions. And right now I'm thinking of going back to Africa because they have less COVID restrictions. So certain countries there look like they'd be nice to go to at this moment. And we have another friend named Hai, who's been traveling around South America for several months, and he's in Brazil now. And he could probably tell us a lot about Brazil, which, by the way, interesting thing about Brazil, it used to be very expensive in the around 2011, 2012, and now it's dirt cheap. The currency's gotten very low. And it's kind of funny how a country can go from being more expensive than the US to, say, cheaper than even Asia. And Ladislav was there not too long ago as well. Although I don't think, based on his reports, I don't think he got very deep into Brazil. I don't agree with everything he wrote, but I'm just saying that there are other regions of the world that we can explore. Unless, Andrew, are you keeping this Asia only, or is it for Happier Abroad all over the world?
Well, this is an open discussion format. We're talking about just world travel.
Okay. Well, those are just some ideas for podcasts in the future, since we've done about, I don't know, an hour and a half on Asia already. Are there more questions you think we need to cover that are important regarding the countries that have already come up?
I have one more question, but it's not related to, it's a question for you, but if Winston has something that he wants to add.
Okay. Shoot.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, because Winston told me about that you have a lot of experience, and for anyone who's going to listen to this, they may want to learn from you in real estate and your business success. And could you kind of talk about that, and maybe talk about what countries are business friendly for foreigners who want to do business in other countries?
Okay. In real estate, they say location, location, location. But for me, I think even more important is timing, timing, timing. Because those opportunities, they come and they go. Like I remember in Brazil, there was a short period under Lula da Silva where you could get condos very cheap, but they went up in value very quickly. And now they're coming back down again, but this is like 15 years later. So about being business friendly, the first advice I'm going to give you is, if you think about doing business in the Philippines, you probably want to think again, because I'd say 9 out of 10, if not 19 out of 20 foreigners I know who tried to do a business that involved investing their own money, they lost big time. They lost a lot of money. And the reason for that, it's not just people trying to scam you, but it's the fact that people drop the ball there all the time. When you're doing a business, you're relying on a lot of other people. You're relying on your partners or your employees, and you're relying on the government. And in the Philippines, they're going to disappoint you more often than not. So you're going to lose your money most likely. Now, condos is a special case because it's very straightforward. However, now with COVID, it's very hard for me to find tenants because they're so paranoid. They won't let foreigners come back. And without the Chinese there, the Chinese were making everything easy because they pay a lot of money and they don't ask questions. They whatever they do in the Philippines, they're making a lot of money. I think they're doing a lot of online casinos. So first of all, about the Philippines, don't invest there unless maybe we get past COVID and you want to do something like a condo. Don't ever think about having a business partner where you buy land or you try to circumvent the rules by doing a company like they do in Thailand, because if that ever goes to the courts, the judge is going to look at the spirit of what was going on, and he's going to say, this foreigner was trying to control this property, this land, and that's illegal, and you're going to lose everything. Okay, so number one is that. Number two, Taiwan, I think, is a reasonable place to try to do business because number one, you can teach English there pretty easily and straightforward, and you don't even have to necessarily do long contracts. Over time, if you localize, you can get real professional employment. That's where I actually worked professionally, was in Taiwan, and I got my job on the ground. And we have another, there's another person from the forum who goes by Air King, who's working in a law office there. And he's been making money there for a long time. I don't know if he's invested in property. And by the way, you're not going to be able to afford property in Taiwan unless you're, well, at least not in Taipei, unless you're a multimillionaire. But I'm not saying to buy property. I'm saying it's a good place to perhaps, or if you have an electrical engineering type of background, there's probably a lot of opportunities in the science park in Hsinchu, because remember, more than half the world's semiconductors are made in Taiwan, and they have 5 nano technology. They have the best technology in the world. So the stock market there has been on fire because of that, because there's so many shortages. And that's a strategic area where I think China wants to muscle in. But if you have a background in electronics, I'm sure you can get good employment there. And when you make money, you can invest and make more money. You can at some stage, especially if you get what I have, which is a permanent residence, you can get a low interest loan there, very low interest. They've got a lot of programs like that. And I think that Taiwan is underrated. People talk about Korea and Japan a lot more than they talk about Taiwan. But Taiwan's so much cheaper than those other two countries. And there's not a lot of scams in Taiwan. People do business. People there actually work hard. They're educated. I think they've had mandatory high school education already for 55 years. So even taxi drivers there are intelligent. And there's this kind of funny taxi driver joke on the forum about Winston, but read that thread sometime. So I highly recommend Taiwan for people who are serious about trying to find a career, even if you have to start as an English teacher. China, I already said, stay away unless you've got a special angle. Things are only getting worse there. Vietnam, I don't know, but I suspect that there are opportunities for people who want to do, say, restaurant business or who have other creative ideas. I know the Vietnamese are kind of like Chinese. They're serious, they're hard workers, and they're serious about business. It's not like the Philippines where people just want to go home to their families and they're not really very serious about thinking ahead and thinking in business terms. About Thailand, again, there are foreigners in the past who've made mountains of money in Thailand, even bar owners. That's over, that's gone. As far as condominiums are concerned, the prices had gone up so much that the rental yields got low. When I bought the rental, the prices were low enough that I was able to get nice yields of, say, 7%. And I think that may come back with COVID, because I think now it's a buyer's market. So when the dust clears and Thailand opens, you can look at property there, especially in Bangkok, because when you buy in the capital, it's hard to go wrong. If you get a good price, there's always the business capital, the business hub, there's always going to be appreciation. Values are going to go up unless the government really mucks things up there. And all of the richest people are going to be in that area. So look at property in Bangkok after it's over. And if you want to get a steal right now, go to Pattaya, because there are some very desperate fire sales there, because so many people can't find tenants and they want to get their money out. So something that might have costed you maybe 3 million baht 3 years ago, you might be able to get it for half of that. Okay. So that's an opportunity if you have some money to invest. Forget about getting financing in Asia, because in Asia, if you can get any financing at all, it's going to be at very high interest rates. Another area that we haven't talked about is Singapore. And if you're a professional and you have whatever it takes to get a job in a company in Singapore, it's hard to go wrong. They always say, follow the money. And the money is in Singapore. Singapore's, on a PPP basis, its GDP per capita is much higher than the US. It's full of rich people. So if you can get established in Singapore in a decent company, a serious company, and you're starting your career, even if you're in the middle of your career and you can use your experience to get hired there in a lot of different service industries, you might do very well. Singapore, there, like I said, wherever you have money and you have a fair government, that's a good place to do business. China's got the money, but the government's not fair. The Philippines, you don't have support from the government. You don't have support even from the locals, really. But in Singapore, you can get both of those things. And the only thing is, you're not ever going to be able to afford to buy property in Singapore unless, again, you're a multimillionaire. I would stay away these days from Hong Kong. I think Hong Kong I had a classmate. She was a Canadian Chinese. She had a wine business in Hong Kong. And when the protests started, she lost all her money. She was a multimillionaire, and then she went from being that to broke because everything got messed up by what the government's doing now. So stay away from Greater China, anything that's under China's direct control. Stay away from it unless you're getting offered a decent job. I mean, anywhere you're getting offered a decent job for decent pay, that's okay. But when it comes to your own money, be very, very careful and stick with places like Taiwan and Singapore, maybe Thailand. As long as, the Thai government, they are pretty efficient. I sold a condo in Thailand a few years ago, and I was able to actually transact the deal in 3 hours. I went into the land office in the morning. I paid the relevant taxes, because you only pay taxes when you sell or buy. You don't pay real estate taxes like the US. And then they did some stamps. We sat down for 20 minutes, done deal. The same thing in the Philippines would have taken me minimum 6 months in Metro Manila. So that just gives you some perspective. And I hope that helps anyone who's thinking about coming to Asia and making their money here or making their career here.
That's good information. Thank you.
Okay.
But how do you get those jobs, Rock? I mean, you have to be qualified, right?
Well, it really depends on what you studied in university. If you do a practical STEM degree, you can even get hired in the States and maybe get sent over. And okay, any company in the West that wants to send you to anywhere in Asia, definitely do it. It doesn't matter if it's China or the Philippines or wherever. An expat job where you're sent over, which is, by the way, that's getting a lot more rare these days. 15, 20 years ago, it was a lot more common. But if you get that, it's a sweet gig. Always go for it, because you're going to get money for your housing. You're going to get money for your health care. You're going to get special vacation time, and you're going to be paid well. And so you can't go wrong with that. But it's all about how you prepare yourself. If you become an engineer, you're going to have a lot of options anywhere, practically. If you study, medicine, of course, you're going to have a lot of options. But if you study, I don't know, urban sociology, come on, that's not really going to get you a job in many places.
What if?
What?
Finance, banking in Hong Kong.
Oh yeah, yes. If you can get a job with an investment, and that's what I did, by the way. I worked in an investment bank in Taipei, and yeah, that's actually I would recommend Singapore. Singapore's become a private banking capital. After they had those problems in Zurich, in Switzerland, with banking secrecy, the U.S. went after them. A lot of private banking money transferred over to Singapore. So, yeah, if you get a banking job, even in the Philippines, with a multinational bank, by all means, even if it's maybe not, they don't pay you as much as they would have paid you in the U.S., it's still a great opportunity. You cannot go wrong with working in a major investment bank. Financially, you're gonna do really well, as long as you can hold on to your job and you can compete. You can hack the long hours, you can work hard, and you can be money oriented for a while. You can be very focused on the job. You can be a workaholic. If you don't want to be a workaholic, then I'm not sure finance is good. However, people who do private banking, sometimes those guys have it kind of easy because their job is mainly to hold hands with the richest people and to be their friends and to court them. And that's not always about grunt work, but that's more about relationship types of work. Now, I will say one thing about the Philippines. I know an Israeli guy there, very good at restaurants. He opened a restaurant there and he's doing very, very well. And to this day, it's open in spite of COVID. It's called Benny's. And he opened up in a really small little place a block away from me. And business got really good. So he moved into one of the malls, and then he moved into his a much nicer location. So in the last 8 or 10 years, he's made a lot of money. He's very successful. And I love to go there. It's 24 hours, by the way. So certain people who have their own concept, or say if you're in the BPO industry, I know certain people like that who've made a go of it in the Philippines. But in general, most investors I know in the Philippines, they come up with, they're trying to make a way for them to have a job in the Philippines. So they talk to local people and you should do this chicken, you should do this piggery, or you should do chicken business, or you should do lending business. Oh my gosh. Or you should do maybe delivery of bottled water. Well, if you get involved with a local and you do that business and it goes well, guess what? They're going to find a way to get you out of it. It's really, really hard. You have to have a lot of business acumen to hold your own. And Benny, the Jewish guy, Israeli guy, he obviously has that. He's an older guy. So there's always exceptions. But for those who are not really exceptional, I'm just going to say, don't invest your own money in the third world. In the Philippines, don't do it. Cambodia might be okay for condos. There's a lot of real estate happening there, and it's kind of being driven by the Chinese. And I got a condo there too, but and so far it's going okay. It's going, I'm getting tenants and everything, but please be careful with your own money. Do not invest your life savings, especially if you're not familiar with the environment. I've been in Asia so long. You're better off investing back home and then taking the dividends and the income and using that money to live in Asia. Please don't ruin your life by making a risky investment in Asia when you're nearing retirement. You might really regret it.
So what if you're not like a computer programmer or an engineer, but you have good office skills, or like Andrew, you have good web design skills? I mean, can you get a job doing that somewhere in Asia?
Well, wait, web design. I think you can do web design. You don't have to be in the same place. you can work from one country when your company's in another country. If you want to ask more about something like that, do you still talk to Public Duende? Do you talk to that guy?
No.
And by the way, speaking of him, guess what? He's very skilled. He was making a lot of money in London in that business, in software, in the software business. And he did everything. He started a company in Davao, and at the end of the day, it just did not pan out. And I suspect it's because of the issues I mentioned earlier regarding the Philippines.
But he was working for himself, right? He wasn't working for an employer.
Yeah. He invested his own money, and he learned that it really does. No matter how competent he himself was in the business, he should have kept the business in London and found a way to work remotely. So if you're in web design or something like that, try to find a way to work remotely. I don't know, because even if you can do it in Asia, you're not going to be paid a lot. The only place you might be able to do that and make more money is Taiwan or Singapore, or perhaps Hong Kong even. But office skills, come on, if you have office skills, you're competing. Everybody has office skills. Filipinos have office skills. So how are you going to, do you want to make 20,000 pesos a month because you have office skills? It's not. Maybe you can teach English online to Chinese and Russians, but office skills are useless.
Couldn't you, as a foreigner, you could get a job like editing or scripts and stuff like I did in Manila with the video game company?
You should talk about that. You worked for a Korean employer. You worked for a Korean company, and they were paying you okay when you were working. That's something you might be able to do. But
only Mr. S got me that. I mean, I would never have gotten that if somebody didn't refer me. But there's always stuff like that, like editing or proofreading or something.
I know, but look, speaking of Mr. S wasn't doing bad about 10 years ago, but these days, he says that his income has kind of gone down in relative terms because there's been a lot of inflation. And it was harder and harder for him to work. And he's making, by Filipino standards, he's making a middle-class income, but, he barely makes ends meet. And the only caveat is now with COVID, there's so many people who want to go overseas that he's getting like a boost in his business, because his business has to do with IELTS and with special tests.
It's like testing people.
Yeah.
Right, to pass some exam.
There's been such a, COVID has messed up the economy in the Philippines so much that more people than ever want to go overseas. And so Mr. The business in his companies has gone up. So he's getting more work than he was getting in 2019. But in general, his career was going downwards.
By the way,
go ahead.
By the way, first of all, I mean, you were talking about opening a business. I mean, you need startup capital, or you need money to start a business, right? I mean,
well, okay, normally you do, but sometimes what people do is they go to their other foreign friends who have money, and say, hey, I got this great idea. You want to, but I don't have much money. You want to be my partner, be my money partner. People do that. Now, if you can do that, if you can find a foreign schmuck to put up his money, why not? What's your risk? Only your time. But again, I don't recommend that because I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to see the foreign schmuck lose his money either.
Right. Could Andrew, like, if he had to, like, teach English? I mean, do you need a TEFL degree to teach English, or can any foreigner do it? Or
talk to Ladislav. Ladislav has taught English in Cambodia, Japan, and a few other places. And by the way, there's another thing I forgot to mention. Before COVID, Chinese, like the number of Chinese coming into the Philippines was like doubling. It doubled like a couple years straight. And there was a lot of money with those Chinese. They were doing online gambling and other things. And so if you could have gotten involved, I mean, they even made condo prices go up. They made condo rents go up. And if you can get involved with them somehow, and I think the same thing was going on in Cambodia, then you might have some money to earn, because those guys I met a Taiwanese girl, I think you talked to her on the phone once, Winston, a long time ago, who was working for one of those mainland casino companies. And she was getting, I think, she was getting like $2,500 a month. She was getting her rent paid. She was getting health care and some other benefits. And she was going to get profit sharing because she could speak Chinese, of course.
Oh, okay. So if Andrew just has web design skills, he just has to find clients.
Yeah, well, I don't
which
know
could
much
be
about
anywhere.
I don't know much about that business. You should talk to people who know about that business.
Well, I've kind of scoped out every opportunity I have available, but I wanted to have the discussion open for just basically which countries are business friendly, and Rock kind of answered that already.
Yeah, my answer is follow the money.
But you need startup capital to start a business, right? I mean,
as I explained, if you have a certain background, maybe you can get hired. And those Chinese coming to the Philippines may be a future opportunity, just as the Koreans were before. Problem with Koreans is they're really insular, and they're not open to outsiders. Maybe the mainland Chinese will be better. We'll see if it comes back. I mean, like I said,
but you mean working for someone, right? Not starting your own business,
or doing business with them somehow, or doing some sort of a partnership where you can offer something. Okay. Like, say, a grocery store, for example. There's a lot of them doing grocery stores there now. And people like their grocery stores because they're better.
A lot of Korean business owners are in Vietnam. They are opening convenience stores, kind of like small little mart, like they call it Kmart. It's like Korea Mart.
We have that in the Philippines too. There's one near me, Kmart, a Korean Kmart.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the same group.
Well, it may be, but yeah, Koreans are one of the most hardest working people I've ever met.
Well, Winston, you were working for a Korean boss. Don't forget that when you did your job.
Oh yeah, I mean that company. I mean everyone seemed to be like a workaholic or something, and that Korean boss, he was there all day and all night. I mean, it seemed pretty extreme. Fortunately, all I was doing was editing like these role-playing game scripts or something, but they still gave me a lot of work to do within a few weeks' time.
And that work was good for you because you tend to be fast with writing, and that's like within your skill set, Winston, because you're pretty fast with the English language. So you were able to make a lot of money per hour because your skills fit that.
Yeah, and that was a temporary contract job, and I might have been able to do more if I wanted to, but yeah, it was just too, intense. It was just too much, with a deadline. But to get stuff like that, I guess you'd have to know somebody that works for them or to have some connection.
About web design, Andrew. The problem is you're going to have cheap competition, I believe, from both Chinese and Indians. In China, every third person has skills to do something like that. And we know the Indians as well, right? So correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you've checked those opportunities out around it, and maybe it's not so easy. Is that right?
I truly believe that, right? Because a lot of the work is being outsourced, and a lot of internet workers are becoming remote, and the pay, the wages are going down because there's more people willing to do the work. So what I've talked about with my friend is, if you have an idea for some kind of web service that is not out there already, then you can make your own internet business at a low startup cost. but it still is going to be a lot of very competitive, and it may not work. But if you do have an idea, then you can build it online.
Okay, I'm going to give a piece of advice to anyone and everyone. Don't be too proud to teach English, okay? Because a lot of people say, "Oh, I have this degree, I have that degree. I'm not going to teach English." But I've seen people who started out by teaching English, and then somehow they expanded it, they made connections, and eventually they were able to do a lot of things that were more interesting, whether or not it was related to the concept of English teaching. So I really want to advise people in general, when you come to Asia, and if you don't have any luck with whatever your degree is in, then teach English, because that's actually not what I did, but it's something that's going to help you to get to know people. It's going to make some money. And when you work hard and you're trying and you're hustling, Asians will respect that. And when I say Asians, I'm saying in certain countries, and they may say, "Hey, when you least expect it, they may come to you and say, 'Hey, we've got this new company, or we've got this position, and what do you think?'" Especially if they know that you're keen to do something beyond English teaching. But you got to pay the bills. So that's where countries like Taiwan come in, because the salaries that English teachers make there can pay the bills. Maybe that's not the case I know in Thailand you can teach English, but it's kind of subsistence. I know that Ladislav was actually doing surprisingly well teaching English in Cambodia, but he's got very specialized English qualifications and a lot of experience. And I suspect that Vietnam, there's a niche for English teachers too. Of course.
Could he do it without a degree, though? Without a TEFL degree or TESOL degree?
Well, you just need a month to do that TESOL certificate. You can do that really quickly. That's not a big deal. You need a bachelor's degree. You need to have a bachelor's degree in something. And then you go do that TESOL, that 1-month TESOL course they offer everywhere. You do that. And of course, you can't really teach English in the Philippines. They don't need you for that there, but you can do it in Korea, although I don't recommend it. I think they work hard, but they also demand a lot. You can do it in Japan or Taiwan. There's a few countries, even China, you can do it in China. And it's a way to just get started working, especially if you haven't been out of college very long. What do you think about that, Andrew?
Actually, I'm in the process of getting a TEFL certification. So I'm
the 1 month one.
It depends on how fast you finish the course. It could be 1 month or 2 months.
Okay, good. So after you have that, how much can you make an hour in Saigon teaching English?
It varies. I think you can start at $10 an hour, and I think some teachers make $20 an hour.
Oh, good.
Oh, that's not bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Now in Taiwan, I think you can make 500 to 1,000 NT per hour. The higher end is if you're doing more specialized stuff, or if you're teaching, say the kids of wealthy people, and there's a lot of wealthy people in Taipei. And the exchange rate, I think, is 1 to 20. What is it, Winston? 1 to 28 now?
That's what I heard. Yeah.
It's been going, the Taiwan dollar's been getting so strong. So you do the math, 500 to an hour at $1 equals 28 NT dollars. And you can get plenty of work if you're if you're a decent person and you have a degree and you've done your TEFL thing. And if you're good with kids, or if you'd like to teach kids, then it's all the easier. Teaching adults is less in demand than teaching kids. Now in Vietnam, are you teaching kids, or are you teaching adults, or both?
I think they if you're a new teacher, I think you start off with kids, and if you're experienced, then you can teach older students.
Okay. Do you like teaching kids, do you think?
Okay, I'm just getting the certification. I haven't started teaching yet.
Okay. Well, teaching kids is, I guess sometimes you have to be a classroom manager more than a teacher, but anyway, good luck with that.
Do you like kids? Yeah. That's what he was asking. Do you like teaching kids?
Well, I've never done teaching before, so I would just take it as a new experience.
Andrew, may I ask if you can try to post more on the forum, because you're living in Vietnam and you're doing something. I'm so tired of these dumb discussions about conspiracy theories. It would be so nice to have real, happier abroad posts that talk about countries and experiences on Winston's forum.
Sure, I will.
Yeah, thank you. We've been online a long time. I don't want to bore people, but Winston, do you think there's anything else that needs to be said in this podcast?
Well, I was just going to say earlier that even if you don't have a TEFL degree, if the school is really desperate and there's no other good applicants, sometimes they'll take you anyways if they're really desperate, but it depends on the school and how desperate they are and how many other applicants there, if there's good other qualified applicants or not. So that's been my experience.
I wouldn't recommend that though, because you're kind of limiting yourself. I mean, that degree is so easy to get. You can do it in just 1 month. It's not a big deal. It's not like you have to study for 2 years or get a proper degree. You go through that intensive course, you get your degree, you invest whatever $1,000 or $2,000, and boom, you're good to go. Assuming you have a bachelor's degree from a accredited university back home.
Okay, I didn't know you could do that in 1 month, but
you can.
Were you going to say something earlier, Rock, about teaching kids? I mean, I think I interrupted you when you were going to say something about teaching kids.
Well, you need a certain skill. You need to be a classroom manager. You need to, some people don't like to be around a bunch of noisy kids, and some people do. So not everyone fits that. But teaching adults is a totally different ballgame, because I'm just saying that unfortunately or fortunately, depending on what your preference is, I think there's a lot more demand for teaching children than there is teaching adults in the English language in Taiwan and probably Vietnam.
Okay. Do you have any more questions, Andrew? Or
I do not. It's getting late here.
Well, yeah, we've already done 2 hours, I think, right? Or
2 hours, yeah.
Wow. Well, Rock must have covered a lot of information today. I mean,
no, we just talked a lot. We like to talk.
Well, you know a lot about stuff that you're talking about, so you can talk about it for a long time. I mean, you should see Ladyslav. He can probably go longer than that. I mean, he'll just go off.
Andrew, as we end this, I want to recommend certain people for you to do podcasts with. One, of course, is Ladislav. One is, if he would do it, is El Claudio or Frank in New Zealand. One would be that Public Duende guy, if you could get him to do it. I doubt he would, but who knows? One might be Marcos Zetola, who's been living in the Philippines for a long time.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think Yik might be able.
Yes.
He's in China.
There's a guy who's been in China.
English.
There's a guy who's been in China forever, Ik, and he lives, I think, in the third tier China, and he's been teaching English. So there's
I'll have to ask him about that.
Yeah.
Do you think World Traveler would come on?
Yeah, I'm sure he probably. Well, I don't know actually. He might or might not, but honestly, this is just my personal preference. Those names I mentioned, all the way up to Ik, those would be really good ones.
Yeah, because I like World Traveler's voice. It sounds very hard Southerner and
well, no. Why don't you get
entertaining voice?
No, if you want that, get Dusty. Dusty's like the perfect
Oh
Like
yeah,
hillbilly accent.
but he's gonna rant about American women the whole time.
You still talk
It'll
to
be
him?
Yeah, it'll be a bashing thing if you
Wait, do
want
you
that.
still
I don't know how much we can get away with that because that might um, be
do you
taboo
still
or
tout,
censored.
wait, Winston, do you still tout the Dusty?
Yeah, his voice is more entertaining. Yeah, like
I
that
know.
hillbilly.
I thought he got angry at you.
Well, yeah, he does. He's a bit feisty, and that's what's entertaining. When someone's very feisty and passionate, his voice has energy, and so it's not as monotone and dull or soft spoken like maybe my voice is and maybe yours is. Because we sound like very mellow people,
Well,
not
we
feisty.
sound like Yankees, Northerners. So, all
or
right.
that guy, yeah. Too bad, Steve. Steve R. He didn't want to come on yesterday, but he has a
Yeah, I
really good,
wanted him to
passionate
come
voice
on.
too. His voice is really energetic and passionate and feisty too.
He is. When I met him in person, he was very opinionated, and I really had a lively discussion with him. He has a lot of strong opinions, I think.
Yeah, but a lot of these guys are eccentric, and so they're kind of unpredictable, and they might opt out for any little reason, so they're kind of unpredictable, and eccentric. So a lot of expats are like that. So yeah, it's just kind of hard to find someone that's really, like really, I guess, very consistent and not, you know what I mean? So, because people who are free thinkers can be very flaky, that's the downside of being a free thinker. You're kind of, eccentric and flaky, so it's hard to find someone to commit.
But Winston, what's the definition of a free thinker? I mean, like, because eventually you have to form your own, you can't just think freely forever. You have to form your own, truths about life.
Well, I mean, it just means you think freely without conforming to the mainstream or the establishment or what most people think. You have your own mind and your own ideas and your own opinions, and you're not afraid to endorse things that are unpopular. Like foreign women or something, or international dating, or looking for love outside your country, or occasionally saying things that might be taboo. Like you don't care what people think, and you just don't conform to whatever is supposed to be normal.
An independent thinker.
Yeah, like that. I mean, it's just a broad term. There's a lot of different types of free thinkers. I mean, some people are free thinkers in that they oppose the media or the government, but they're not going to be free thinkers when you talk about living abroad or dating abroad. And other people are free thinkers when they talk about UFOs maybe or Bigfoot, but they're not interested in the stuff we talk about. And there's people that will talk about happier abroad stuff, but they don't want to talk about UFOs or conspiracies or anti-government stuff. So there's many types of free thinkers too. It's not just one type, but just someone who thinks for themselves and doesn't follow the norm or the whatever's popular or mainstream. I mean, that type. So people like that can be eccentric and a bit, a little wacky sometimes and unpredictable. And that just comes with the territory. You know what I mean? So.
Sure.
Anyway, so are there any last questions or you had or?
That's all I have.
Okay. Well, I hope you learned a lot from this because Roth really has a lot of knowledge and experience and stuff.
I did. Thank you, Rock, for being here and sharing all of your knowledge and experience.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope I can do a follow-up sometime about Africa or about South America.
Okay, cool. Is this going to go up on your channel, Andrew, or?
It is.
Oh, okay. Well, when it does, I'll just link to it or make a copy of it or something. Hope you enjoyed it.
I did. So thank you guys
Thank you,
both
guys.
for your time.
Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah, we should do more of this. It's really informative.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, well, I'll ask some of my other friends and see if they'll be interested and let you know or something.
Sure. All right. I guess, or I guess you could do this on a regular basis on your channel, Winston.
I could. I mean, I haven't done it for a while. I guess I could. I mean, I just have to get used to it and learn how to use this software. And I guess it's easier than I thought it was because, I'm not really good at figuring out new technologies, but yeah, I guess we could, and I'm not always like comfortable with the camera too, but I guess that takes some practice and getting used to too. So it's definitely possible. I mean, this new technology makes it all easy and possible. We just got to do it, got to be consistent.
Okay,
And I'm
guys.
sure there's a niche for it too. Yeah. There's a niche out there for all this too.
Okay.
All right, guys. I guess we can go ahead and stop the recording here.